we're afraid of what people will think, or we're afraid we're not good enough, or we're afraid we're too much. And so we hold ourselves back. When we do that, we're muting ourselves. And there are too many people that are muting themselves in the world. And I, for so many years, was one of them. I've discovered the power of unmuting myself, of showing up in the world in a way that is joyfully expressed and boldly alive. That's something that has been so important to me as I've discovered how freeing it is to be unmuted, to unmute our body and to unmute our ideas and to unmute our desires, to unmute ourselves in relationships and at work, and to be our own advocates and to ask for what we want and need. The unmuted life is a life that is fully alive and fully expressed and confident and clear. And to me, it's the only way that I know how to live now. I know what it's like to feel confined and stuck and small and silenced. And I also know what it feels like to be expressed and alive and joyful and present and seen. And it's so much better of a life to be unmuted. And that is what I want to bring you into. Are you ready to unmute yourself? Let's make it happen. Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to another Unmuted Monday. My name is Rachel Druckenmiller, and I am the host of the Unmute Yourself show. And I'm so excited to have so many of you here today. I know that, let's see, Toby is with us, Jeff is with us. Drop in the chat, let us know where you are joining us from. It's always fun to see where everybody is joining us from. So if you'll take a second and just drop in and then maybe refresh the page. Maybe we can, Tim, drop in a link for people to refresh the page if they're having trouble seeing it. I know someone asked if it's started yet. So take a moment, drop in the comments where you are joining us from. It really helps us to know, where people are. I am here in Baltimore, Maryland, on the East Coast, and I'm excited to be with all of you today and for you to hear from our guest. And I know that you're going to walk away from the experience feeling a sense of hope, feeling a sense of possibility, feeling equipped, feeling empowered, feeling moved, and feeling fired up to really focus on the ways that you can show up and be an agent of change in this area of mental health. That is something that affects all of us. Suzanne joining us from Kansas City. Welcome, Terilyn, joining us from Denver. We've got Jeff, south of Chicago in Illinois. Welcome. Dina, welcome. Nicole is joining us from Detroit, Michigan. Jim from Redondo Beach, California. We've got Tom Doherty from the Bay Area. Mary from Wiley, Texas. Welcome. Woohoo, East Coast, Dina. Love it. So feel free to let us know. Again, it's just helpful to get a sense of geography where people are joining us from coast to coast, and excited that you're all here today. So to get started, one of the things I want to ask you all to do is to think about a moment that has been a bright spot for you in the past week. Now, this is something that focusing on gratitude, focusing on taking in the good, which is something we learned from a guest, Rick Hansen, about a year ago, that taking in the good is one of the ways that we can support our mental health, and really focusing on the things that we're appreciative, the glimmers of hope, the moments of joy. So take a moment and just drop into the chat something that has been a bright spot for you, no matter how small. It could be an itty bitty bright spot, or it might be a giant, like starburst bright spot. But drop in the chat, let us know. One that I'll share is my husband and I, we babysat our nephew at 3.5 years old this weekend. We went to the aquarium. We got to see the dolphins and the jellyfish, and went to Chick-fil-A, watched some Disney movies, went to the playground. We just had a great time, because you can't not be present with a 3.5-year-old. And we had some early mornings, but it was such a wonderful weekend, and just a reminder of what can happen when we are brought into the present moment and to experience the contagious joy of small children. So that was really special. Let us know. Veronica, I woke up this morning. How often do we take that for granted? And we're like, I woke up today. There's a lot of people that couldn't say that. And so sometimes it can be what might feel like the simplest thing, but but is really the most profound, is the gift of life, the gift of having another day. So Veronica, thank you for sharing that. Tim, spending time with Kofi, Kara Hauser, and Kim Arnold last week, amazing. Carolyn, my youngest son graduates from college, and all the fun celebrations with family. It's a beautiful experience having these milestone moments and getting to celebrate with people that we love, and not taking those moments for granted. If you're just joining us, feel free to drop in the chat what has been a bright spot for you from the past week. Right side of the dirt. So true, Tom. It's yes. And I know that you know about this, given your background and whatnot, just how important this conversation around mental health is, with some of the, you've had to carry some challenging burdens all of us had, but with family and having, I know that there's a definite connection to this. Completed pre-course work for a new certification training. Amazing. Expanding your technical knowledge, Toby. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. So what I want to do now is I want to tee up our guest. I don't want to spend any more time not introducing you to this guest. One other quick update. My 4th song, called Afraid to Cry, is coming out next month. So stay tuned for that. Yay. I shared a snippet of it on here on Saturday morning. All right. So our guest today, Leslie Weirich, has been speaking on the topic of suicide prevention for the past 7 years. And she often says she didn't choose this work, but this work chose her. More on that in a moment. Over the past 3 years, she's been speaking on Army bases all over the country, presented a talk to the Pentagon, West Point Military Academy. She has been all over, really speaking to the troops and inspiring them and talking about a message that is so important, and her passion for men's mental health in particular really comes through. In 2016, her family established the Austin Weirich Memorial Scholarship Fund and has given away over $24,000 in college scholarships. She hosts an annual 5K every September to raise money for the fund, and this is the shirt. You get a special shirt every year if you do this. So follow her, and in September, sign up. You can do the race from wherever you live. You don't have to be physically present where she is to do it, to really support the cause. Her first book, The Gifts of Grief, came out on her son's birthday in January, and she's now speaking throughout the nation on post-traumatic growth. You can reach out to Leslie through her website at leslieshope.org. Please help me give a warm, unmuted welcome to Leslie. Hi.
Hi, Rachel. Wow. Thank you for that introduction. It was, taking it all in here. But thank you for having me today during Mental Health Awareness Month.
It's an important, when I was thinking about who I wanted to have a conversation with this month, I was like, from the get-go, I was like, well, Leslie.
Oh,
this has been a long time coming, I feel like.
Yes.
And I know that both of us have a passion for breaking stigma around this topic and
Right.
for being more open and honest. And I'm curious, I know there's some people here that know some of your story, because a part of our story is not the entirety of it.
That's for sure. Mm-hmm.
And so I would love if you could share with us, just help us understand, what is it about this topic of mental health that is so personally important to you? And kind of how did we get here to talk about this? And then I have, would love to dig into a deeper conversation about, what this looks like and how we can break some stigma around it.
Sure. Well, I think a lot of people know me because I write quite a bit on LinkedIn, but not everyone does. And so give a little backstory on how I got here, Rachel. As you mentioned, in 2016, we lost our 20-year-old son, our only son, Austin, to suicide. What made it significant was that he took his life by sheer coincidence on World Suicide Prevention and Awareness Day, which is September 10th, for those of you that don't know. At that time, I was working full time, and, our daughter was a junior in high school. He actually took his life 3 days before her 17th birthday. So, there's so many things. I did a whole podcast on the things that I was grateful for, gratitude, the things I was grateful for around Austin's suicide. And one is that, he did not take his life on her birthday, but 3 days before her birthday. So it gives us a reason to remember him on the 10th, and then we look right back up and celebrate her on the 13th. So, got her through high school and everything. And then on the 2-year anniversary of Austin's death, he attended one of the last 2 remaining all-male colleges in our country. There's one in Indiana, west of Indianapolis, Wabash, all male. And then there is one in Virginia. I was just there in March and spoke, Hampden-Sydney College. Those are the only 2 remaining all-male colleges. That's significant to our story. On the 2-year anniversary of his death, we received a text message later on in the afternoon, and it was from his former roommate. And he told us that a young man by the name of Evan Hansen, who happened to be the co-captain of the football team Austin played football on, also took his life. So both young men took their lives. For the listeners, you can Google 2 Wabash football players die by suicide. So both young men took their lives on World Suicide Prevention Awareness Day. Neither of them had any idea what the day was. Mm-hmm. So that really kind of thrust us out into, I started receiving, will you come and speak at our Rotary Club? Will you come and speak here? Will you come and speak locally? And then in January of 2019, I spoke to the largest nonprofit in our state, which they actually had read our story, because it made national news. They'd read our story, and from there they wanted me to come and speak at their annual fundraiser. So I did, and that evening we broke a 5-year fundraising record and raised $249,000 to put licensed clinical therapists in schools. So I was like, I'm a woman of faith. I said, okay, God, you got my story. Let's go. Let's go. So, I continued to work. And then, what happened the following year, the whole world shuts down. I took a PTO day. I was an executive recruiter for a large credit union in my area. And I took a PTO day to go speak at a charter high school. And somehow or other, Rachel, I don't know why I'd never asked this question before, but I asked the question. I said, how many of you have lost a friend or family member to suicide? And in a class, there were 2 health education classes in there. And in the first class, I thought maybe a handful of hands would raise their hand. There were probably about 30 students that raised their hand in the first class out of about 60. So about 50%. And I thought, okay, this is it. We've got to go. We got to get this done. So I asked in the next 2 classes that I spoke in, same response. I went home that evening, kind of in tears, and said to my husband, if not now, when? Because I was almost 60 years old then. Mm-hmm. I'm not a young woman. I'll be 65 in September. So I said to my husband, if not now, when? Mm-hmm. So I decided to resign from my job. And, that was February 25th of 2020. Yeah, right. Yeah. So, a few weeks later, the world shuts down to COVID. And I knew the problems that we were having were only going to get worse with the pandemic. And so then I partnered with our community mental health center. They reached out to me and I partnered with them. And the rest, as they say, is history. We raised in the first 6 months about $100,000 to put these programs in schools called Sources of Strength, which teaches resiliency through 8 protective factors. And so I worked with them for a couple years, and then we moved out of the area. But yeah, we've done a lot of good work in the past. We have our scholarship fund, which is now fully invested. We turned that over last year to the Community Mental Health Foundation. So the Community Foundation, all donations are matched for our scholarship now at 25% up to $25,000 a year. So that's a little bit of my story, Rachel. That's my big why right there. My son is my why. Yeah.
I mean, I think, and I know I'm sure you've seen things pop up in the comments as people have, some people that may know and other people that may not, just the weightiness of that. And sometimes we can have an experience in our lives where we can be defeated by it, or we can make a choice to say, I'm going to use this. Like, I didn't want this to happen. If I could go back, like I would want him back.
Right.
And I'm making the choice to speak on a topic that is heavily stigmatized, that a lot of people still have kind of walk on eggshells around and don't necessarily know how to address. How do we bring this up? How do we address this? How do we talk about it? If I'm concerned about somebody in my life, how do I unmute myself? How do I say something? How do I not say the wrong thing? So I'm curious. I know there's some myths that I'm sure you come across pretty commonly in this space.
Right.
And so I'm curious what, if you could be a Mythbuster, there's that show on whatever channel is Mythbusters.
Yeah, I'll take it this month. Yep.
If you could be a Mythbuster around just some of the ways that really people are muted and even in the dark a bit about this topic, what are some things that you've got the microphone. So what would you want to say? How would you want to clarify some things?
Well, I think the number one myth to anybody is they're afraid if they bring the topic of suicide up that it'll give someone the idea to do it. you can't put the idea of suicide in someone's head. If it's not there, you can't put it in. If I came into your studio today, Rachel, and you said to me, hey, Leslie, are you thinking about taking your life? Are you thinking about harming yourself? Are you thinking about suicide? I'd say, no, not today, Rachel. That thought's not in there. You can't put it in my head. Mm. But if the thought is there and I've thought about it and I'm thinking about it, when you open the door, when you unmute, you give me permission to unmute. And then what happens, and all the research, all the data shows it's incredibly, I use the word protective a lot. It's incredibly protective to bring the topic up and talk to someone about it. So if you really, really care about somebody and you're worrying about them, not talking about suicide is not going to help. But what you need to do is you need to choose your time and your place. It's really important. Say if you're a parent and you know your child's not a morning person, right? But they're an afternoon person, and I always felt like the best time for me to talk to my kids was in the car because I had them captive, so to speak, but I wasn't looking at them. We were just driving along. So, wherever you think is a good place to talk, and you need to specifically ask them, have you ever thought about suicide? I always say, I wrote an article a few years ago called Say the S Word. You have to say suicide. You have to say it. You can't say, well, are you thinking about maybe, just say it. Say it and then be quiet. I think the hardest thing, and I'm going to speak from a parent's perspective because I lost my son, but the hardest thing for all of us is listening, and actively listening is the hardest thing, but it is incredibly protective when it comes to suicide. So if you can open that up and you can unmute and you can give them the space and you have to be very careful about your response because they may say, yeah, I have been thinking about it a lot lately. You as a parent, the first thing you want to do is swoop in there and fix it, right? We're fixers. We can't do that. We have to just ask them open-ended questions. And I love just tell me more. Tell me more. That must be really hard to feel that way. Tell me how that feels and draw them out. And when you draw them out, you can assess, do they really need to be seen by somebody right away? Do they need therapy? Do they need to go to the hospital? What do they need? But you're not going to know unless you ask the question. So if any of the listeners are concerned about anyone in their life, get with them in a safe space and ask the question. And that is the most protective thing you can do to help someone who is thinking about suicide.
And I would imagine it's like you feel like you're opening up Pandora's box,
right?
And you're like, I won't be able to handle it if they answer this affirmatively. I think we tell ourselves that we're not going to be able to do, so then we avoid it entirely. And so I'm curious from a resource perspective, what are some of the places people can go if someone got a yes to that answer? It's that question, right? What are some of the places people could go?
Right. I get that question so many times from all over the nation. It's hard for me to answer because everyone has different insurance. Everyone has different coverage on things. But the most important thing is to keep them safe. Keep them safe. If you know that they are at high risk, don't leave them alone. I love to go with them. Even when I speak on bases, and we can talk about that in a moment, when I speak on military bases, I will go, there's something called MFLACs, Medical Family Life Counselors. I will actually go with the soldier. I'll walk over to the MFLAC's office. If they want me to stay for a few minutes, I will. If they want me to stay for the hour, I will, whatever it is. But I will actually take them. So it's really, really important, depending on where you live, depending on the insurance that you have, what coverage you have, but to keep them safe. So make sure that are they really at risk for harming themselves? And we can talk about all kinds of means. Do they have a plan? There's something called a safety plan, and I really, really highly recommend it for especially younger people. We can talk about why younger people are at a higher risk because of the way their brain is developing. But with a safety plan, it's basically, if I feel this, I will do this. If I feel this, I will do this. So you're getting it ready for when those moments come. And, and so you have sort of a covenant agreement with them that they will do no harm. They're going to go through their safety plan. And I think everyone that has teenagers in their life Kids in college, make sure you can even download them off the internet. You can download safety plans. Make sure you have a safety plan filled out, and fill one out right beside them. Don't make it like a me against them. Make it an us thing and say, I'm going to fill this out too, because I have bad days too.
Mm.
And so I think it's so very, very important that we normalize this conversation, because I know, Rachel, you wrote your song, Check on the Light Bulbs, which we're going to hear in a little bit. It's so amazing, but it is so important. You said, and a lot of people said, when Twitch took his life back then, when you wrote the song and you were inspired to write it, you were surprised Twitch took his life when you were reading about it. It didn't surprise me at all, because my light bulb of a son took his life. My son was the night before in the library, running and getting burgers and fries for everybody at McDonald's, that night. I mean, he was always taking care of everyone else. And so those people, I always say high achievers are at high risk. So we are not exempt. We all have moments. We all have days. We all have weeks, but we have to have a plan in place for when that happens. Who are our go-to people? Who do we talk to? Where's our safe space? So especially for young people, if they're going off to college or even if they're in high school, make sure you have a safety plan filled out for them. Just a matter-of-fact plan. If I feel this, I do this. Here's 3 things that ground me. You can have it all on there. And then it's really, really important to just keep the conversation going and normalize it, because I say May is Mental Health Awareness Month, but every month is Mental Health Awareness Month in my world, in all of our worlds. So the more we talk about it, the more we normalize it, the more we're going to reduce these horrible suicide statistics. And if I can even tell you, Rachel, last year, we broke a record in the United States for having the most amount of suicides ever. And I'm going to round it up to 50,000, because it was 49,494, whatever, but I just rounded up because we know suicides are always underreported. They're always underreported. So I rounded up to 50,000, and I said, take a town around you, look at the population, take a town that's around 50,000, wipe it off the map. That's how many people we lost to a preventable form of death. It's preventable, Rachel.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm going to be talking about it until I have my last breath. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's a powerful number. I mean, and again, when you imagine it in the context of, a town, because people we can separate ourselves from statistics if we don't have an emotional connection to it directly, or if we can't imagine it in a context that we can grasp and understand. So to put it in that sort of framework, really paints a picture that I think people can immediately and viscerally connect to. And, I'm wondering when you look back, because sometimes I know it's probably tempting and normal for people to look back when, something like this happens, and to think about what was something I missed, or what was the way, you do a lot of work, particularly with men's mental health, especially, the military is certainly a group where there's still a tremendous stigma around this. And there's so many struggles with PTSD and suicidal ideation. I'm curious, what are the ways that, of all the people you've talked to, your own experience, what are the ways that you see people muting themselves that are contemplating suicide? Like, what are the things that you notice that, or maybe even after the fact, that you find out of the ways that people are muting themselves that cause them to maybe not reach out, or not open up, or not seek the help they need?
Well, I'm going to talk about my son for a moment, because, that's my experience. Yeah. My son was a college football player. I mean, he would walk out on the field on bloody knees to play football. I mean, he loved the game of football. And his freshman year, he had 3 back-to-back football injuries. Nothing really big or major, but the first one, he separated some tendons from his left ring finger, had what was called a boutonniere deformity. I'd never even heard of it before. And we were going to get it repaired, when he quit playing football, but, he kind of wore it as a badge of honor, and then he had that. And then 2 weeks later, he separated his AC joint in his right. So he had a splint on his left finger and a sling on his right arm at the same time. His freshman year, trying to carry a laptop, then 3 weeks after that, he gets taken by an ambulance off the field to the local hospital there because he dislocated an elbow in practice when he was down in a stand. And he's such a big guy. He was a big boy, 6'4", 240 pounds.
Oof.
So they had to put him under to get that elbow back in. Those 3 combined injuries, and that took him out for the season. Those 3 combined injuries, I look back now and I go, when we're wrapping the ankle, when we're wrapping the shoulder, we need a therapist in there right away. We need a counselor. We need somebody to be wrapping the brain, talking to them about what this is doing to them, what this injury is doing to them. So his sophomore year, he never really could get back into the game. He could never quite get back into the game because of those injuries. And so, by his junior year, he had decided he wasn't going to play anymore. He was going to prepare for grad school. Once again, thinking about graduate school, a high achiever, really, really reaching out to, notice when people are moving through things a little too quickly. Notice when these high achievers are just going from one thing to the next. We need time to process things that happen, and when we're not processing it, when we're just moving from one thing to the next thing, it's stuck in there. It's stuck in there. And that's when we need to unmute. That's when we need to talk about them. And so I think knowing what I know now, especially with student college athletes, and I know more and more colleges are putting therapists and counselors on the sidelines, which is very important. The Hidden Opponent, which is a website, you can maybe drop the link to that. The Hidden Opponent talks about student athlete mental health and the importance of it. Austin is on their page. Evan is on their page. But it's really important. So I think when you talk about people muting themselves versus unmuting themselves, it goes straight to our mental health. We have to process things that happen. We have to process disappointments. We have to process loss. We have to process it. We can't just move on to the next thing. And these high achievers, these high achieving people, they tend to move real quickly into the next thing without processing it. And then something happens and it's a trigger. And then it brings all that back up. Because I say suicide's never about one thing, Rachel. It's a perfect storm. It's a lot of little things leading up to that one moment. And in that moment, we can't hold on to hope, which we want to talk about hope today. Yeah. Hope is forward thinking. Yeah. What are we looking forward to? So they lose hope in that split second. They can't see that there's more to hold on to than there is that they've lost. And they give up hope and they lose their life. And
So speaking of that, how do you help people find hope? I mean, and what could be a state where people, and understandably so, go to a place of just complete and utter despair or being, just paralyzed with sadness. And I think that's a natural, normal thing to have happen, so I'm curious, how do you help people find hope in the midst of such loss and such grief? Because that is something that thing to look forward to is the thing that can really carry us, lift us out of the pit of despair, So tell us more about that.
Right. Well, anybody who's followed me for longer than 5 minutes knows I have a hashtag that says connection is protection. So it's so important for us to have people in our lives, and I mean real people in our lives who are our connectors. I mean, I say it's important to have 3. When I speak on military bases, I go through this with all the soldiers. I speak to the sailors in the Navy. I say you need 3. Why do you need 3? Because one might not be available. The other one might not be. So you need a minimum of 3. I like 5, but I'll take 3. If I can only get 3, I'll take 3. And when you have those, you put them on your phone. Make sure they know. Make sure they accept that, they're your person. In the middle of the night, if it's 2:30 in the morning and you need to talk to somebody, you're going to call them. You're going to call them. They're going to accept your call. And they're going to get to you, whether it's on the side of the road, wherever you are, they're going to come, they're going to meet you, they're going to be there for you. But it's so important to have people that are ready to meet us where we are in the pit, because that's what's going to keep us from making a choice like my son made and like his teammate Evan made. So connection is protection. And I think I cannot stress that enough. I wrote a post this morning about somebody I connected with a year ago in line. It just really, People need people.
Mhm.
We need each other. And, LinkedIn is a beautiful community. I have met more incredible people in real life and online, but I live to meet them in real life. I mean, I
Yeah.
want to see them. I want to hug them. I want to know them.
Mhm.
But anytime you have a chance to meet somebody in person, grab it, go for it. And so I think making sure people have three people. I say I like five, but I'll take three. Making sure they have three people in their phone at all times they know they can call. And I always, for younger people, we can talk about the younger brains not fully developed, Rachel, till it's,
Mhm.
they say 25 to 27, depending on trauma in your childhood. But um, having three things in your phone that you're grateful for every day, you can change them up, you can keep them. My three things that I am grateful for today are, and I
Mhm.
tell these soldiers, I'm like, I don't care if it's your dog. It's
Mhm.
your reason, not mine. You
Mhm.
can make it anything you want. But when you're stressed, you're walking somewhere or you're in the shower in the morning, I want you to say it out loud. Say those three things out loud because, we can talk about neuroplasticity and rewiring the brain and all that good stuff, but it really does help you to manage your anxiety when you're speaking gratitude out loud because you cannot be angry and grateful at the same moment.
Mhm.
You can't be stressed and grateful at the same moment. So the more you try to put that gratitude in your brain, the better off you're going to be.
Yeah.
So I think living a life of gratitude is huge. And I try to teach, I talk a lot about gratitude and I talk about the importance of gratitude for the brain and what it
Mhm.
does to the brain when the brain is under extreme stress. So that's a couple things. Three people in your phone, three things that you're grateful for today. So simple. I mean, we
Yeah.
can all do that,
Yeah.
and but it works. It truly works.
And I would invite everyone to do that right now. Everyone who's listening right now, drop in the chat something that you're grateful for. We're gonna come back to the checking on the people thing in a moment, or having people. And I'm curious. I know I've heard there are some people. I want to say it's 25% of adults or something don't say they have anyone that they would call a best friend,
Yeah.
like particularly among men, right? And
Yeah.
so I'm curious if
Yeah.
someone's listening and they're like, I can't think of anyone, or I can only think of one person that I would put on that short list of people that would be my people. I, I'll give a little bit of context, like from when I was growing up and even into my young adulthood, I just I wasn't vulnerable with really anybody in my life, and so I didn't want to, either burden people or have them view me as weak, or have them view that I was maybe like incompetent or couldn't handle my stuff alone or by myself. So I'm curious, for somebody that might struggle to come up with a name, what's a maybe a tip or an insight you would give them to maybe help them to jog their mind and their memory, and to get them thinking about who might they connect with and how might they reach out to that person.
Well, I think it starts with things that you have in common with people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, do you go to the gym every morning? And maybe you're kind of a loner there. You go, you work out, you shower, you leave. Start talking to people.
Mm-hmm.
Start wherever you go, try to build a connection. Whether you go to the same coffee shop every morning, whatever you do, try to build that connection because in that connection is where you're going to build a relationship and that relationship is going to be your person. But, it's really important to I always tell everybody, if you go through the same coffee line every morning or every 3 times a week, you don't know your barista's name. Come on,
Yeah.
because to use people's names is so powerful, Rachel. You go through, I mean, I go through a local Starbucks where I live, and I can tell through the speaker who was going to be there at the window.
Mm.
I mean, I know them. And my husband and I go to this place for breakfast every Saturday morning. I know the waitresses in there. I know the wait staff in there. I know I can look at their face and tell if they're having a good day or a bad day. One of the waitresses a couple weeks ago, she just wasn't herself.
Mm.
I'm fortunate enough that I have her cell number, and I texted her and I said, "Hey, just want you to know I'm here. If you ever need to talk or vent or
Mm.
anything, you just seemed a little off this morning." And she replied back. She had a breakup.
Mm.
Breakups can be very triggering. And so that is really hugely important. Getting back to that, I do talk a lot about men's mental health, Rachel, and I know we're going to run out of time before we run out of things to talk about. But I think that it's very, very important for people to know. I speak on a lot of military bases. So the leading cause of death right now in our military is suicide by personal firearm. The catalyst that flips the switch, unfortunately, on the majority of those suicides is the breakup of a personal relationship. And as I tell them, I'm like, no one is worth dying for. No one's worth taking your life over. To lay your life down for your country is a noble thing, but to lay your life down for a girlfriend or a wife or a boyfriend, there's zero honor in that. So let's really get to where, I work through I give them 8 warning signs of a toxic relationship, an unhealthy relationship. We talk a lot about relationships, but really very, very important if you have anybody who is in a volatile relationship right now, anyone listening, that you talk to that person about that relationship and that you get in there and you really, really try to give them a safe place to come and talk to you about it, because that relationship can be, it can cost them their life, and it's not worth it. It's not worth it.
It's not worth it. And that your point about the connection is protection it's so true, because even there's people on this live today or who are going to be listening to the recording. I have one friend who we send an emoji to each other when we're just like having a certain kind of day.
I love it.
And when I see his emoji pop up, I'm like, okay, that's like the alert sort of, signal. And he'll just reach out and sometimes check on me. Just want to see how my light bulb's doing. I get that a lot from people. Yeah. How's my light bulb? And it makes a difference to know that someone cares enough to reach out and that they're sensing it. And it's like, because sometimes we wait because we're like, oh, I don't know if I'm close enough to this person to do that, or am I stepping over a line by asking them that, or what if they're really fine and they think I'm getting up in their business? And so instead of following that like gut sense that we have to check in on someone, to reach out to somebody, to say hello, we dismiss it because we get in our head about it.
Yep.
And so I think part of it is making the decision to say, I don't necessarily know why this person came across my mind. I don't necessarily know why this person was put on my heart, but I'm just going to follow that sense that I'm getting, right. And I'm going to reach out and I'm going to check in on them and see how they're doing.
Right. That's crap. It's so important, Rachel. Anytime somebody comes across your mind, and sometimes we'll be busy during the day, we'll be working, and then we'll be like, oh, I'll get a hold of them later, or I'll, and jot that name down, write it down, put a memory, put a sticky note on your laptop, whatever it is, contact them, reach out to them. I can't tell you how many people I've sent stuff to, and they're like, wow, the timing of your text is really good. And, and I think, okay, I'm going to drop what it is and I'm going to call them. I'm going to check on them. I'm going to, and just for whatever reason, I know a couple weeks ago, Jeff and I sent you a video, like we were talking about you, and I was like, let's send her a video. We don't know what kind of day she's having, but we're going to send her a video. So, it's like, it's so important. You're right, Rachel. And you speak so much about it all over the nation on unmuting yourself. But if we could all unmute a little bit more, if we could go into what we're really thinking, what we're really feeling, and connect with people, connection is protection. People need people. We need each other. So, that is really important.
Well, something that was mentioned here that I really appreciate, Tom is sharing a lot. Tom is definitely a community-oriented person. And one of the things he shared, for anyone that might be listening and struggling with, I don't have that person. I don't have that list of 3 people. I can't 5. I couldn't possibly come up with 5. Tom makes some really good points. One is around volunteerism. So not only is that beneficial to our brain and our spirit and our soul for so many just inherent reasons of doing good for others, but also the opportunity we have to connect with other altruistic human beings who also care about doing good for others is a really powerful way to build community and to build connection with people that likely naturally have qualities of compassion and empathy because they're taking themselves out of their own world and putting themselves into a position of service. So Tom mentioned that. And then he said every man morning rucks every Saturday. What are you celebrating and what are you navigating? So they ask each other those questions. What are you celebrating? What are you navigating? So these could be questions that you ask a friend, a question that you ask, if you're on a leadership team, that you ask other people on your team, that you ask the team members that you lead, that you ask a partner. What are you celebrating? What are you navigating? So any other final thoughts on that idea of how we can focus more on that aspect of connection, which really does help to protect us?
Volunteerism is great. And I'm glad Tom brought that up because I did a podcast a couple weeks ago on senior suicide because there's so many older people. We don't want to think about it, but there's a lot of older people that are taking their lives. And a lot of it deals with loneliness. I don't know if anybody that's listening read the report on loneliness last year by Dr. Vivek Murthy, who's our Surgeon General, but it was shocking. When he talked about the lack of social connection. So loneliness isn't about being alone. We know we can be in a room with 500 people and be totally alone, right? Or we can be in a room with one and be totally connected. It's about lacking social connection. So I think, when they were talking about the senior suicide, one of the things that they're trying to do is pair seniors with other seniors. It's that peer to peer. And there's different programs and they're getting paid and they're feeling valued, they're feeling seen, they're feeling heard. So I think anytime you can volunteer somewhere for something, some organization that you love, even if it's an hour a week or an hour a month, then you're going to meet like-minded people. You're going to meet people that have the same interests you have. Anytime you can connect with people where you have a commonality, it is so powerful. And so there's a great, and volunteering is just, to me, volunteerism is where it's at because that's connection, right? Connection is protection. So I love that, Tom. Thank you.
Connection to purpose and to people, right? Because if you're going something through a cause, there's something purposeful about it. And when people feel more connection to purpose and to people, those can be really strong anchors.
Right.
Really strong
exactly.
Anchors. Before we go into the song, I'm going to share the song, as you mentioned, alluded to. I'm going to sing the song Light Bulbs live on here. But before I do that, I'm curious about, I think because of the nature of what we do when you're a speaker, you understand that words matter and you understand that language matters and that choice of words can really create, I've heard the phrase words create worlds. And so the words we use are really impactful and they matter. And so I'm curious, from your perspective and your experience, what are some of the things that, when it comes to language, that we maybe want to consider doing differently? What are some changes you've noticed even in this space?
Well, I'm going to talk real briefly about the word commit and why we are asking people to change their language. And it's really hard because we've always said committed suicide. It just kind of flows off our tongue, right? We are, and the AFSP, that's the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention. They sort of are, who I follow and have my license plate. And, that's my go-to. So the AFSP is asking that we all use the word died because my son died and it was by suicide. So he died by suicide. It's real simple. He died by suicide. One of the reasons why it's so important that we change some of the language is because we're trying to reduce the stigma around suicide. And when we lose somebody we love, first thing is the family can go very inward. And we say in the world of suicide prevention, good postvention is prevention. So we need to get in there as quickly as possible, support the family and friends so there are no what's called contagion suicides out of that suicide. One of the things that we know is when we can use neutral language rather than language that stigmatizes, because committing, no matter what you do or don't think about it, it does have a negative connotation to it that goes back all the way to the 1400s in England. When people would die by suicide, the person would be dragged through town on a horse, thrown in a garbage pile. The family would not be given any land to bury them. And they were considered a criminal, and the family was considered criminals. So the language started way, way back when they would say they committed suicide. So over the years, it's just become the norm. And if we think about it, it's really the only type of death we use that word in front of. We don't say somebody committed a heart attack, they committed a stroke, but we say they committed suicide. So if we can understand, and I believe suicide is a brain attack, Rachel, I believe that the brain gets overwhelmed. Everybody's circumstances are different. Everybody's background is different. But I say no one really dies of suicide. I say this in all my talks. They die of loss of hope in that single moment when they can't have any forward thinking to hold on. So if we can really understand, and I break it down, I show the brain, the back of the brain's our fight or flight. Our fight or flight grabs a hold of the front of our brain, which is our prefrontal cortex. Prefrontal cortex has higher level decision-making and reasoning and judgment and logic. So if we can understand that this person's brain was offline in that moment, it was not working, not functioning, then I think we might use a kinder, gentler language. So I think if I could get any message out in the month of May, it would be, can we change our language and can we start saying they died by suicide?
Mm.
And then that will give people a lot more opportunity to come forward and ask for help in the aftermath of a suicide too. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
I appreciate that. I've become more conscious of that because of you too, right? If I'm describing a situation or talking about
yeah,
somebody
yeah,
that it's like because you get so used to saying something a certain way, you
yeah.
have to catch yourself.
Right. And it's
You
okay
know,
if you catch
yeah,
yourself. It's really okay. I want to tell everybody,
yeah,
it's a new language that we're learning. It's really okay if you want to kind of go, they died by suicide.
mm-hmm,
Or I just learned this. So I'm learning how to, use different language. They died by
mm,
suicide.
yeah.
So yeah, yeah.
And Tara Lynn says, my brother died by suicide. Definitely a loss of hope. 40 years ago, our family never talked about it.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
it's like, what a weight that is to bear, and the shame, right? The shame that's
Oh,
associated with
absolutely.
it is so
Absolutely.
silencing.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And it's like it can be hope and vulnerability can be antidotes to shame.
100%, 100%. And that's why it's really, really important that we get those people in our lives that we can talk to about
Yeah.
what we have to look forward to.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's just, you're going to go out for pizza later on this week with a friend, or you're going to, whatever it is, you have forward thinking. And the more you have forward thinking in the front of your prefrontal cortex, the less likely you are to grab a hold of that moment of desperation.
Yeah.
And so it's holding on to hope, getting hope in the front of your brain and keeping it there. And
Mm.
that's what's really going to turn things around.
Mm. And Tom here mentioned too, said I couldn't say the word suicide for years, and has a, you know,
Yeah.
has been open about family history and just how hard that can be, because
Yes.
there's not often an open channel for people to have conversations about this. And I think sometimes the fear is I don't want to burden somebody with my pain, but people have a capacity to handle pain greater than we give them credit for.
They sure do.
And they want to be there. No one wants to, if anyone listening knew that somebody that somebody that were struggling in silence and they thought they were burdening you, that you would say to them, "Oh my gosh, no, please, please let me be a container for you in this
Right.
moment. Let me be a
Right.
witness for your
Yeah.
experience." I think
Yeah.
most human beings have
Hmm.
the capacity to hold that space for another
Hmm.
person. It's just that
Hmm.
we're often hesitant to ask for what we need.
Hmm. And that's where the real healing and the real relationships can form, when
Yeah.
you actually hold that space, because there's nothing that's going to build a relationship more than something like that. And then eventually you think it'll flip on the other side and they'll hold it for you. So I think it's really, really important.
Well, I want to tee us up for this song, and then we'll continue a little bit of the conversation before we sign off today. This has been such a meaningful just discussion with you today, Leslie. And you can feel your heart coming through and what you're sharing. And I know that people have already been impacted by what you talked about. And this song, I know some know, you're one of the first people that I think I sent a snippet of it to before it was
Love it.
released, because I was like, I
I
think
love
this
this.
is going to resonate with you.
Yeah.
And while that has not been my personal struggle or journey, I've had family members that have struggled with really severe mental health challenges, and I've had moments where I've been concerned that suicide might be on the table. And in my own journey of burnout, as somebody who was the wellness director and the bright light at my company and helping other people get healthy, I was struggling and burned out and got mono, and I was afraid to talk to anybody about the fact that I was having a hard time and wasn't the picture perfect thing that I presented myself to be. And so, as you mentioned earlier, when Twitch, so the DJ, dancer, and TV personality, when he died by suicide in December of 2022, I saw it pop up on people.com. That's where I get my trash reading. But I went on there and I saw and I did a double take, because I saw his picture and then I saw a date range, and I was like, well, I've watched enough episodes of The Ellen Show to know who he is,
Mm-hmm.
And then I spent the next hour and a half reading all these things that people were saying about him online, people that knew him that said, we had no idea he was such a bright light. He lit up every room he entered. We had no idea. And a friend of mine, or a coach of mine, had posted on Instagram a picture of him with just the phrase that said, "Check on the light bulbs." And I just spent the next 2 hours writing a poem. And then 3 months after writing that poem, I was on the Peloton and the melody line for the song came to mind. And I was like, this is a song.
Mhm.
And this is a song that other people need to hear. I think it's a song that'll help people feel less alone. And it's a song that it's a reminder to check on the light bulbs, to check on the people in your life that you assume are fine. Just like Austin, right? Like just so
Yep.
many people would have looked at him and been like, he's the
Yep.
model everything.
Yep.
He's the model everything. And he was struggling with that, his own darkness. And so my invitation as we're going through this is for everyone who's listening to drop in the chat as a gratitude, extending the gratitude conversation, Leslie, that you brought us into. To drop in the chat just the name of somebody who's been a bright light in your life, to just recognize them, to give them a tag, send them something, you just drop in the chat something you appreciate about them, or send them a text message. And if you send a text, you can just write done so that we know that you're on board. We're gonna like light up this Monday morning, afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. We're gonna light up the virtual the virtual sky with our light. And so I'll just ask everyone to do that. You can drop as many light bulbs as you want in there, just a source of encouragement, source of gratitude. And then we're gonna sing the song, and then we'll close out with some final thoughts from you, Leslie. How's that sound?
That sounds great, Rachel. And one thing you said, it was a song. It's not. It's an anthem. It's an anthem.
Thanks.
For suicide prevention. It really is, Rachel.
Yeah. So here we go. Here is the song, Light Bulbs. We feel the warmth, we fan the flame, while they silently suffer in pain. They shine like a star, so happy from afar, but they feel all alone in the dark. How we're showing up isn't working. We pretend we're okay when we know that we're not. What we feel we try to conceal. So check on the light bulbs. You know who they are. The ones that burn brightest, the ones that ignite us. They live like a spark. So check on the light bulbs before they go out. We don't see them dimming, the light they're emitting, until they fade out. So check on the light bulbs. They're trapped in a mind that's telling them lies, like you'll never get through it this time. Just be the strong one, the nothing's ever wrong one, the go along to get along one. You'll find how we're showing up isn't working. We pretend we're okay when we know that we're not. What if we revealed what is real? So check on the light bulbs. You know who they are. The ones that burn brightest, the ones that ignite us. They live like a spark. So check on the light bulbs before they go out. We don't see them dimming, the light they're emitting, until they fade out. Pick up the phone, give them a call, be there and listen. All you gotta do is show up and be the light for them. So check on the light bulbs. You know who they are. The ones that burn brightest, the ones that ignite us. They live like a spark. Oh, check on the light bulbs before they go out. We don't see them dimming, the light they're emitting,
Awesome, Rachel.
Thank you, Leslie, just
Yeah.
for being here. I'm loving seeing people drop in all
Yeah.
of the names in the chat here. And Veronica, both of my sons, David Lopez II and Joshua David Lopez, may they rest in peace.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Tommaso Cordulo is a light in my life. Joy Sohn, Andrea Sanchez, Shannon Leeson. I just love seeing these moments. Nassim, Andrew, Kara, Leslie, my boyfriend who's been there for me. Feel free to drop in any other names of people that you want to let them know that you see them today. So Leslie, I know that we, in our last few minutes, would just love to invite, one, I want people to, again, if they haven't already, to get your book, The Gifts of Grief. I know we could spend another entire episode talking about this, and maybe we will. Maybe we'll just do that again before the end of the year. We're like, we'll just come back together and talk
All
about
right.
this in
Sounds
more
good to
depth.
me,
Like,
Rachel.
we should just do that. But I'm curious, we talked about, we're going to unmute hope today and invite people to walk away from this feeling more hopeful. So any final thoughts that you would share, and we'll drop your links in as well for people to stay connected to you and make sure they follow you on here if they're not already. Anything you want to leave people with that could help them connect a bit more to a sense of hope in their own life?
Well, I think I would say read my book, because my book will give you hope. And there is we all have a story. Everybody has a story. And I think that sometimes, Rachel, and you talk about it a lot, when you mute yourself because you think, what would somebody think about my story? Or I can't tell anyone this. When you find a person to be brave enough to share your story with, it unleashes so much in you and in them. And so my hope and my prayer for everybody is that they have somebody like that in their life that they can share with. But if they don't, that they will really, really make a concerted effort to try to find somebody to connect with, and somebody that they can go through life with. Because one of the things I say is, I just feel like the more we reach out and share our story, because if I would have just stayed, I had a good friend on LinkedIn that reached out to me after Austin died, and she said, you get two choices in life, Leslie. Two. You can either stay stuck in your story, or you can stand on your story. And so we chose to stand on our story, and it's made all the difference in the world. So I would encourage anybody to reach out to me on my website or send me a DM on LinkedIn and share your story. If you need a safe space, I'm a safe space. Share your story and know that you're not alone, and you are loved, and you are somebody. Yeah.
Oh, Leslie, thank you so much. I think that's a beautiful reminder for us to leave with, because if we recognize that all of us, just the fact that we're even here is a miracle. The fact that any of us exist, the fact that any of us made it this far is really miraculous. And to remind ourselves and each other that all of our stories matter, and that all of us have a place, and that all of us matter. As Tom often says, born to matter, right? Whether it's we are somebody or we're born to matter, that is so true. And to recognize that we are not alone. I would encourage everyone, the people that come to this show are just such solid humans. So if you see a name in the comments that you haven't connected with, connect with these humans. Dr. Jeff is another one. We met, 5 years ago, 6 years ago online, met in person right before the pandemic. He's such a solid, oh my gosh, what a wonderful human being. But yeah, everyone in this thread, connect with them if you're already connected. If you want more hope, you want more light in your life, they are people who will help to bring it. So Leslie, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for being one who gives us hope, who reminds us of the power of our story and the power of standing on our story, and for being the voice that you are in the world, the light that you are in the world, and for all of the work that you are doing to save and to change lives. I'm so tremendously grateful. So thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you for having me during Mental Health Awareness Month. And I'll look forward to coming back later this year. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. And everybody, we'll be back June. I want to say it's the 12th or the 17th, or 10th or the 17th. Stay tuned. I don't remember the day, but Jamal Marshall is going to be on, and he is also an advocate for mental health, and that's Men's Health Month,
Yeah.
and so we're going to be having that conversation with him. So stay tuned in the next 3 weeks. That's going to be coming. But everybody, thank you so much. And until then, show up for each other. Be honest about what you're going through and recognize that you're not alone. So thank everybody. We will see you next time.